Most Americans throw away hundreds of dollars in food every year. But in millions of Chinese households, people have developed simple habits that make ingredients last longer, stretch further, and create almost no waste. And once you apply those habits to your freezer, the savings add up fast. Here are 25 Chinese freezer tricks that can cut waste, save money, and make weeknight cooking dramatically easier. Number 25. Freeze your ginger root whole. In Chinese cooking, ginger is a non-negotiable staple. It goes into everything from stir-fries to soups to marinades. The problem for most Americans is that you buy a big knob of ginger, use a small piece, and the rest dries out and shrivels in your fridge within days. Here's what Chinese home cooks do instead. They take the entire fresh ginger root, seal it in a Ziploc bag with as much air removed as possible, and toss it directly into the freezer. When you need it, you do not even thaw it. You just pull it out and grate it directly from frozen. The ice crystals that form inside the ginger actually break down the fibrous cell walls, which makes frozen ginger even easier to grate than fresh ginger. You get more juice, more flavor, and zero waste. A single piece of ginger that costs less than $1 can now last you 6 months or more. Number 24. Freeze scallions pre-sliced in a bottle. Green onions, or scallions, are used constantly in Chinese cooking as a finishing garnish and flavor base. Most Americans buy a bunch, use 2 stalks, and watch the rest go limp and slimy within a week. The Chinese solution is simple and brilliant. Wash your scallions, dry them completely, slice them thin, and stuff them into an empty plastic water bottle. Screw on the cap and freeze it. When you need scallions, just shake out exactly how much you want. They pour out individually because the bottle shape prevents them from clumping together. No more soggy green onions, no more wasted bunches, and you always have a finishing garnish ready in seconds. Number 23. Freeze tofu to transform its texture. This one is genuinely mind-bending if you have never tried it. Tofu is a centerpiece of Chinese cuisine, but fresh tofu has a soft, somewhat bland texture that does not absorb marinades well. Chinese cooks discovered long ago that freezing tofu completely changes its molecular structure. When the water inside tofu freezes and then thaws, it leaves behind a sponge-like network of tiny holes throughout the tofu. This frozen and thawed tofu now soaks up sauces, broths, and marinades like a flavor sponge. The texture becomes chewier and more satisfying, almost like a meat substitute that actually competes with protein. Slice your tofu, freeze it overnight, thaw it, press out the excess water, and then marinate it before cooking. You just unlocked a completely different ingredient from the same block. Number 22. Pre-portion and freeze homemade dumpling filling. Dumplings are one of the most iconic foods in Chinese culture, and every experienced Chinese home cook knows that making dumpling filling from scratch is time-consuming. So they never make a small batch. They make a massive batch of pork and cabbage filling, or whatever combination they prefer, divide it into portions sized for one cooking session, wrap each portion tightly in plastic wrap, and freeze them all. When a dumpling craving hits, they pull out one portion, let it thaw in the fridge overnight, and they are ready to wrap and cook. For Americans who love making pot stickers or wontons at home, this trick alone can save you hours each month. Number 21. Freeze leftover rice in single-serving portions. This one seems obvious, but the technique matters enormously. Chinese families almost always have leftover rice, and day-old rice is actually preferred for making fried rice because it is drier and fries better. But what about when you have way too much rice for the next day? Scoop individual serving portions of warm rice into sandwich bags, flatten them out into thin sheets, and freeze them flat. They stack perfectly in your freezer and take up minimal space. When you need rice, you snap off a portion, drop it into a pan with a little water and oil, and you have fluffy rice in under 5 minutes. No microwave mush, no wasted rice, no expensive instant rice packets. Number 20. Freeze cooked and shredded chicken in broth. Chinese poached chicken, particularly white-cut chicken, is a technique where chicken is gently simmered in lightly seasoned broth until just cooked through. Chinese home cooks often make a large batch, shred the meat, and freeze it packed in some of the cooking broth in portioned bags. Freezing the chicken in its own broth prevents the protein from drying out in the freezer and means it thaws with perfect moisture and flavor. Drop a frozen portion directly into hot soup, fried rice, or noodles. Compared to buying rotisserie chicken regularly, making and freezing white-cut chicken in bulk can save American families $50 or more per month. Number 19. Freeze citrus zest before juicing. Chinese recipes frequently call for citrus, particularly in Cantonese and Sichuan cooking. Before you juice any lemon, lime, or orange, zest the entire fruit and freeze that zest flat on a piece of parchment paper. Once frozen, scrape it into a small bag. Citrus zest has intensely concentrated oils that give enormous flavor to dishes, marinades, and teas. Once frozen, this zest keeps for up to 6 months and adds brightness to any dish. You are essentially capturing flavor that most people throw straight into the garbage. Number 18. Freeze bone broth in ice cube trays. Bone broth, or what the Chinese call hai soup, is the backbone of Chinese cooking. Making a proper pot of pork or chicken bone broth takes hours of simmering with ginger and scallion. Chinese cooks never make a small pot. They make an enormous batch, cool it completely, skim off any excess fat, and pour it into ice cube trays. Once frozen, the cubes go into labeled freezer bags. Each cube is roughly 2 tablespoons of concentrated flavor. Toss 2 or 3 cubes into any stir-fry, noodle dish, or vegetable sauté, and it tastes like you cooked for hours. Americans who start doing this stop buying those tiny, overpriced cartons of broth at the store entirely. Number 17. Freeze chilies whole to preserve heat and flavor. Chinese cuisine uses a wide variety of fresh and dried chilies. Fresno chilies, Thai bird chilies, and Chinese dried red chilies all freeze beautifully. For fresh chilies, simply wash them, dry them thoroughly, lay them on a tray to freeze individually first, then transfer to a bag. This individual freezing step prevents them from clumping into one solid brick. Frozen fresh chilies keep their capsaicin potency and their flavor far better than dried alternatives. When you buy chilies in bulk during peak summer season, you can lock in the lowest prices and have homegrown or farmers market heat all winter long. Number 16. Freeze wonton wrappers with parchment between layers. Store-bought wonton wrappers are sold in large packs, and it is nearly impossible to use the whole thing before they dry out. Chinese home cooks buy wonton wrappers in bulk from Asian grocery stores. Immediately separate them into smaller stacks of about 20, lay a sheet of parchment or wax paper between each stack, wrap the whole thing tightly in plastic, and freeze them. When you need wrappers, you pull out exactly 1 stack, let it thaw at room temperature for 30 minutes, and they separate perfectly without sticking. Same principle works for dumpling skins and spring roll wrappers. You just extended the shelf life from 5 days to 6 months. Number 15. Freeze garlic cloves whole. Before you do anything else with your next head of garlic, try this. Peel every single clove, lay them out on a small baking tray or plate, and put that tray in the freezer for about 2 hours. Once the cloves are individually frozen solid, transfer them into a Ziploc bag or airtight container and put them back in the freezer. That is literally it. When you need garlic, you pull out however many cloves you need and either grate them straight from frozen using a microplane or let them thaw for about 30 seconds and mince as usual. The cell walls break down slightly during freezing, which actually makes the garlic easier to crush and releases its aromatic compounds faster when it hits the hot wok. In Chinese cooking, garlic is not a garnish. It is a foundational flavoring used in almost every savory dish, so having it ready to go at all times is a genuine game changer. A single bag of pre-peeled frozen garlic can last you 3 to 4 months, and you will never again buy those sad pre-minced jars that taste like nothing. Number 14. Freeze fish fillets in water. This technique might sound strange, but it is completely standard in Chinese households and fish markets across China. Take your fresh fish fillets, place them in a Ziploc bag or a container, and completely submerge them in cold water before sealing and freezing. The water forms a solid protective ice layer around the fish that acts as a physical barrier against air. Air is the enemy of frozen fish. It causes oxidation and that papery, dry, fishy freezer burn that makes fish unpleasant to eat. With this method, your fish fillets stay tender, moist, and fresh tasting for up to 3 months. When you are ready to cook, Thaw the whole block in the refrigerator overnight or in a bowl of cold water for about 45 minutes. The flesh comes out pristine. This is how you buy fish when it is on sale without worrying that you are going to waste it. Number 13. Freeze noodles in nests. Cooked noodles, whether egg noodles, wheat noodles, or rice noodles, are notoriously annoying to store. They clump together into one sad mass. The Chinese kitchen solution is to toss the cooked noodles lightly in sesame oil, then twirl them into individual portion-sized nests and freeze them on a tray first before bagging. Each nest stays separate, drops straight into boiling water, and is fully reheated in about 90 seconds. The sesame oil prevents sticking and adds a subtle flavor that complements any broth or sauce. Batch cooking noodles this way means a proper homemade noodle dinner takes literally 2 minutes on a weeknight. Number 12. Freeze mushrooms with their soaking liquid. In Chinese cooking, dried mushrooms like shiitake are typically rehydrated in warm water before use, and that soaking liquid is pure umami gold. It is used in braises, soups, and clay pot dishes to add a deep, savory richness that is almost impossible to replicate any other way. Here's the trick. After you soak your mushrooms, do not discard the liquid. Strain it to remove any grit, then freeze the mushrooms and their soaking liquid together in portions. You can use small containers or even ice cube trays for the liquid separately. When you need them, you have both components ready and matched. The frozen mushrooms actually become more porous after freezing, which means they absorb sauce and braising liquid even faster when cooked. You are saving time, saving flavor, and saving money by getting everything out of those dried mushrooms that they have to give. Number 11. Freeze vegetable scraps for umami broth. This is deeply ingrained in Chinese household cooking philosophy, which prizes zero waste. Every time you trim vegetables, whether it is scallion roots, ginger peels, mushroom stems, corn cobs, or cabbage cores, toss them into a dedicated freezer bag rather than the garbage. Once the bag is full, simmer everything in water for an hour with a splash of soy sauce and some dried shiitake mushrooms if you have them. What you get is a rich, deeply savory vegetable broth packed with umami that costs you absolutely nothing. You already paid for those vegetables once. This trick extracts every last dollar of value from them. Number 10. Freeze steamed bao after cooking. Char siu bao, vegetable bao, red bean bao. Whatever filling you love, making them from scratch is a serious investment of your Saturday. The problem is that most people either make too few and regret it, or make too many and let them go stale. Chinese families solved this a long time ago by treating the freezer like a second pantry. After you steam your bao and let them cool completely to room temperature, place each one on a small square of parchment paper, then arrange them in a single layer in a freezer bag, making sure to squeeze out as much air as possible. When you want one, you do not even need to thaw it. Place it straight into a steamer basket over boiling water for about 8 minutes and it comes out exactly as soft, fluffy, and fragrant as the day you made it. The parchment square keeps the dough from sticking to the basket. This works because the high moisture content and the yeast-leavened dough actually freeze exceptionally well, and re-steaming reactivates the soft texture without drying anything out. Dim sum restaurants have been doing this for decades. Number 9. Freeze spring rolls before frying. Spring rolls are a classic across Chinese regional cuisines, and making them is labor-intensive. But here's the secret Chinese home cooks use for parties and celebrations. They assemble all the spring rolls, place them on a tray seam side down, freeze them completely solid, then bag them up. Frozen spring rolls go directly from freezer into hot oil without thawing. The frozen center steams as the outside fries, which actually gives you a crispier exterior than if you fried them fresh, because the moisture stays controlled and does not escape as quickly into the oil. You can prep 50 spring rolls on a Sunday and fry them individually as needed for weeks. Number 8. Freeze egg yolks and whites separately. Eggs are expensive right now, and this trick can save you serious money. Chinese baking and savory cooking often call for just yolks or just whites separately. When Chinese home cooks find eggs on deep discount, they buy in bulk, crack them over a bowl, separate whites from yolks, beat the yolks lightly with a tiny pinch of salt or sugar to prevent them from becoming gelatinous when frozen, and pour them into ice cube trays. Once frozen, they pop them into labeled bags. The whites go into their own ice cube tray without any additives. Each cube is roughly 1 egg white or yolk. Now you have eggs ready for months, bought at the lowest price you found. Number 7. Freeze scallion oil in cubes. Scallion oil is one of the most quietly important flavors in Chinese cooking. It is the base of scallion noodles, the finishing drizzle over steamed fish, the secret in a bowl of wonton soup. Making it takes time, standing over the stove, slowly coaxing the flavor out of a pile of scallions in a pool of neutral oil. So the next time you make it, make 4 times as much as you need. Pour the cooled oil into an ice cube tray, making sure each cube gets a few pieces of the cooked scallion too, and freeze solid. Once frozen, pop them out into a sealed bag. Each cube is roughly 1 tablespoon, which is a perfect single-use portion. When you need it, you drop a cube directly into your hot pan, and within seconds, you have freshly flavored oil ready to go. The fat base protects the flavor compounds during freezing, meaning virtually no degradation in taste or aroma. This is one of those tricks that makes you feel like you have a professional prep cook working for you every day. Number 6. Freeze wontons on a tray before bagging. This is perhaps the most universally practiced freezer technique in Chinese household cooking. When you make wontons, you never cook them all at once. You fold the entire batch, arrange them in a single layer on a lightly floured baking sheet, and freeze them until completely solid before transferring to freezer bags. The key is that initial tray freeze. If you bag them while still soft, they stick together in a solid mass and tear when you try to separate them. Once they are frozen individually, they drop into bags loosely and you can grab exactly 4 or 20 for soup without any clumping. This method works identically for pot stickers, dumplings, and any stuffed pasta shape you make. Number 5. Freeze chili oil in portions. This follows exactly the same logic as scallion oil, but with a completely different flavor profile and a different set of uses. Chinese chili oil. Whether you make your own using Sichuan chilies, star anise, and cinnamon-infused hot oil poured over chili flakes, or you start with a store-bought version that you then customize, benefits enormously from being portioned and frozen. The ice cube tray method works perfectly here too. The fat carries the chili and spice flavors without breaking down, so when you thaw a cube, it tastes just as rich and complex as when it went in. The practical benefit is that you can make a big batch once every few months, freeze it in 1 tablespoon cubes, and have perfectly measured portions ready for noodle dishes, dumplings, or stir-fry bases whenever you need them. No waste, no spoilage, no reaching for a jar that has been sitting open in your fridge, developing an off smell. Number 4. Freeze stir-fry sauces in cubes. This one is genuinely life-changing for anyone who cooks Chinese food regularly at home. The flavor backbone of Chinese cooking comes from layered sauces. Oyster sauce, dark soy glaze, chili oil bases, and blended stir-fry sauces take time to prepare from scratch. Make large batches of your most used sauces, pour them into ice cube trays, freeze until solid, and store in labeled bags. Each cube is a precise, ready-to-use portion. Toss 1 cube of homemade oyster ginger sauce into a hot wok with vegetables, and you have a restaurant-quality dish in 3 minutes. This system transforms weeknight cooking and eliminates the cost of buying dozens of individual sauce bottles. Number 3 is the one that surprises Americans most. Freeze cornstarch slurry starter in portions. Cornstarch slurry is the backbone of Chinese sauce thickening, used in stir-fries, braised dishes, and soups. The problem is that mixing cornstarch and water every single time is tedious, and if you are not careful with ratios, your sauce turns lumpy or stays too thin. Chinese home cooks prepare a larger batch of properly mixed cornstarch slurry using a 2-to-1 ratio of water to cornstarch, then pour it into an ice cube tray and freeze it. Each cube is 1 perfectly measured portion ready to use. Here's why this is brilliant. When a frozen slurry cube hits a hot sauce or soup, it melts and disperses more evenly than fresh slurry that was not fully mixed. You get silkier, more professional results every single time. This one small habit will visibly improve your cooking. Number 2 is for anyone who loves Chinese dipping sauces. Freeze black vinegar dipping sauce in portions. Qinqiang black vinegar, also called zhenjiang vinegar, is a cornerstone condiment in Chinese cooking used for dumplings, braised pork, and cold noodle dishes. Making a proper black vinegar dipping sauce with ginger, soy, and sesame takes a few minutes each time, and open bottles of vinegar lose their complex sharpness over time once exposed to air repeatedly. Make a full batch of your dipping sauce, pour it into an ice cube tray, and freeze it. Each cube is a single serving portion. Pull one out before your meal and let it thaw at room temperature for 15 minutes, or place the cube in a small dish and it is ready before your dumplings are finished cooking. You waste nothing, and every portion tastes freshly made. Number 1. The Chinese Freezer Meal Pack System. This is perhaps the most powerful money-saving concept in Chinese home cooking, and it comes directly from the practical meal planning tradition in mainland Chinese households. The idea is to build complete, ready-to-cook freezer packs for your most common Chinese dishes. For example, for a classic tomato and egg stir-fry, you would freeze your diced tomatoes separately in a portioned bag. For a beef and broccoli, you marinate your sliced beef in soy sauce, oyster sauce, cornstarch, and baking soda, then freeze it flat in a bag. Add a separate bag with pre-blanched broccoli florets. For a mapo tofu pack, you freeze your pre-cooked doubonjiang and ground pork base in one container. Label everything with the dish name and the final cooking instructions. When dinner time comes, you pull the relevant pack components, defrost quickly in cool water, and the entire dish comes together in under 15 minutes. The baking soda in the beef marinade tenderizes the meat even while frozen and makes it velvety once cooked, a technique called velveting that is fundamental to Chinese restaurant-quality cooking at home. These freezer packs eliminate the most common reason people order expensive takeout, which is that it feels too complicated to start from scratch on a weeknight. You essentially have restaurant-quality Chinese meals waiting in your freezer at a fraction of the cost. There you have it, 25 genuine Chinese freezer secrets that go way beyond just sticking leftovers in a bag. These are techniques built on centuries of practical wisdom, zero-waste philosophy, and an unshakable commitment to flavor. The Chinese approach to freezing is not about convenience for laziness. It is about working smarter, honoring the food you buy, and squeezing every last drop of value out of every ingredient. Start with just 3 of these tricks this week, and I promise you will notice the difference in your grocery bill by the end of the month. If you found this video useful, drop a comment telling me which trick you are trying first. Subscribe, because next week we are going into Chinese pantry organization secrets that will change how you shop forever.